Okay, so this is the first video I'm going to do on algebra. This is just an introduction to algebra, hopefully a bit of recap and a few things that you may have remembered from years 7 and 8. So this next topic we're doing is algebra, and what we need to do first is just understand the components or parts or the language involved with algebra. So in algebra, what we're mainly doing is we're working with these things called pronumerals. So pronumerals are where I replace a number or with letters, and these letters represent numbers that I don't know, or they represent numbers that can change. So for example, I might be finding a quantity, so these are unknown numbers. So I might be finding a quantity, or I want to represent a scenario and it's a number that is changing. So it's a number that is changing. So for example, I have this little expression down here, and we're going to go through what an expression is in a second. But my pronumerals would be, for example, x in the first term, y in the second term, so I'll just highlight that, x times y or xy in the third term. Those are just my pronumerals. My pronumerals are just my letters. So here I'm going to highlight this example here. So my pronumerals are my letters. They are used to represent numbers. Now when we write algebraic terms, here we have hidden multiplication or division. So for example, in this term that I've highlighted here, 7y. 7y just tells me I'm doing 7 times y. The multiplication here is hidden. So I don't write the multiplication sign. Mathematicians are quite lazy, so they hide the multiplication sign. So when we see a term that looks like that, what we're doing is we're multiplying. Okay, now the next part is what an algebraic expression is. An algebraic expression is just a mathematical statement without an equal sign. So this whole thing here, 3x plus 7y minus 2xy, this is an example of an expression. It's an algebraic expression. So it's just a mathematical statement. And my algebraic expression is made up of terms. Now terms are separated by plus signs, so like this first one here, or minus signs. So terms are separated by plus or minus signs. So if you have a look here, in my expression here, I have the first term, 3x. I have my second term, 7y. I have my third term, 3xy. And my fourth term, 5, plus 5. They're all separated by these plus and minus signs. So my expression here has 4 terms. Okay. The next thing you need to know is what a coefficient is. Now, a coefficient is just a number put in front of a pronumeral and tells me how many times I need to multiply that pronumeral. So for example, in my first term here, 3x, my coefficient is 3. Coefficient is of x is 3. This tells me I'm doing 3 times x. If I look at my third term, for example, now this is where it's a little bit tricky. You might just think that it's the 2, but the coefficient also includes the sign before it. So here, it's not just going to be 2. The coefficient of my xy term is -2. The coefficient of my xy is my -2. So coefficient is just the number before my pronumerals. And the last thing you need to know is what a constant term. Now, the constant term is a term that doesn't have a pronumeral in it. So if you have a look here, my constant is just going to be this last bit here. The constant is a term without a pronumeral. So that's just a bit of recap of the things that we learnt in algebra hopefully in years 7 and 8. So what are pronumerals? So pronumerals are just your letters that are used to represent numbers that are unknown or changing. Then we had what an expression was. So an expression is a mathematical statement mathematical statement without an equal sign, and here we were able to identify how many terms there were in this expression. So expressions have terms which are separated by plus or minus signs. Then we had our coefficients, the number in front of our pronumerals, so my coefficients. And finally, I have my constant term at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that first example in your contingency booklet. So we had to identify the parts of this algebraic expression. So we had to look at this expression, 5a plus 2ab plus 7 minus 4b. Now, if you have, I'm just going to zoom in here. There's a few questions involved here. The first part is how many terms are in the expression. So part A, how many terms are in the expression? Now, if you remember what I wrote above, well, in my expression, terms are separated by plus or minus signs. So I'm going to look at my plus or minus signs. I've got one there, one here, one here. So if you count them all up, I've got one term, the 5a. I've got two terms, my 2ab. I've got my third term, that plus 7. I've got my fourth term, that negative 4b. So here there are 4 terms. I'm just going to write them out. So I've got 5a, comma, 2ab, comma, 7, and negative 4b. So those are my 4 terms. Okay. Part B. I want to find the coefficient of 2 of my terms, pronumerals. So the first one is A. Coefficient of A. Now, if you remember, I said up above, the coefficient is just the number before that pronumeral. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the term that has an A in my expression. Now, if you have a look, there's actually 2 terms that have A's in my expression, 5a and 2ab. But only one of them is actually just A by itself. It's just the 5a. So if I want to find the coefficient, I just look at the number in front of 5a. So the coefficient of A is just equal to 5. Okay, part B. Coefficient of B. So using the same process, I'm just going to have a look at the number in front of B. Now, B has a negative 4. If you have a look up here, it was a minus 4. When you see a minus sign, you need to include it in your coefficient. So here, it's not just going to be 4, it's going to be minus 4. So the coefficient of B is minus 4. Okay, the last part is I want to find my constant term. Part C, my constant term. Now, I said up above, constant term is just a term without a pronumeral. So which one of my 4 terms doesn't have a pronumeral? Well, it's the 7. The 7 doesn't have a pronumeral. So I'm just going to put the constant term is equal to 7. So hopefully that was quite helpful in just helping explain the parts of algebraic expressions for you again and just giving a quick recap. If you need to go through things and watch the video again to go through things slower, you may do that.